We got a big show for you guys today on the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We're going to talk about who the best player on the defense is, if the Saints have a Hall of Famer on the roster. We're going to dive into some stuff about the Sean Payton compensation and who is wide receiver one now with Chris Olave playing the way he is. We are coming to you from the Better Call Bado podcast studio. And if you need help with car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, maritime and Jones Act, hurricane, or storm claims, you better call Bado at 504-323-4777 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review. And as always, check out our friends, Firehouse Subs, Veterans Boulevard location. Great people, do great things for the community. Support them because they support all of us with the work they do for the city of New Orleans. So that's it. We're going to get into it. Big show, big show. NewOrleans.Football podcast. Let's go.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year, but we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Debo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son, and don't forget the pass rush. James QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you at the Super Bowl party, eating on them double. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
Hey guys, what's going on? We back for another week of NewOrleans.Football podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Washington, and I'm here with Mike Triplet and Nick Underhill. What's going on, fellas?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right. Mood's a little bit better on Twitter this week with the Saints winning a game. People aren't ready to kill each other over reserve running backs and stuff. So just as a society, I think everybody's doing a little bit better.
It's my first Tuesday pod after a win ever.
Yeah,
they're not ready to kill me either.
Well, look, man, we got a bunch of stuff to get into today, and I'm gonna just start off the pod by hijacking whatever little topics I had, because as the intro was playing, something came to mind, and I'm just gonna ask it because I'm the host and I get to ask what questions I want to, and that's just how it is. So, all right, my first flex. When was the last time there was this much uncertainty around the team? And I'm going to quickly elaborate on it, right? We don't know if the offense is good or not right now. There's a lot of questions. We don't know who the quarterback is. Some questions out there about the defense. And, I think even you can look at, maybe the coaching staff and wonder if it's as good as we perceived it was, previously. So, Mike, starting off with you, just off the top of your head, when was the last time you seen this amount of uncertainty on the team? Or am I just, that's a bad take?
No,
from me.
It's a great question when you throw in the coaching staff too, because we used to have a couple known quantities. I mean, I'm going to say it reminds me a little of 2015 when they decided to pretty much rebuild everything but Sean Payton and Drew Brees. I mean, that was the year they traded Jimmy Graham. They made 4 trades that offseason. They went with a 10-person draft class. They, brought in Jeff Ireland to revamp their scouting and everything. So there was way more different about that team, and it was the first time we'd seen them be bad and decide they needed to rebuild. But they still had Sean Payton and Drew Brees, 2 known quantities. This year's team has almost no known quantities. We thought maybe for a little while the defense was a known quantity, but even that's a little bit of a question mark after they really struggled in this last game. So at no time since Sean Payton first arrived have there been more question marks in more areas than there is right now. I think that's very fair, including, I don't know if we're going to get to this, but the future, including the fact that we aren't just looking at this, well, this year's a blip on the radar, but the long-term outlook is cloudier than ever too.
I'd go back to 2005, I think. I mean, just because at least when they had Sean and Drew, there was some certainty and there was still some hope of competing, and you kind of assume that they were gonna find a way to be in the playoff hunt, and they consistently did that, and you at least had something to hang your hat on. Right now, there isn't a lot there. The defense is supposed to be the backbone of the team, and then last week it wasn't. And look, I think they'll get back to being that, and I think DA is a great defensive coach, but those 2 guys, you knew there were 2 Hall of Famers
Yep.
in the building that you could rely on, and if everything else bottomed out, you weren't that far away from finding your way back. It's a quarterback-driven league. They don't have the quarterback to drive this bus, so I would go 2005.
Yeah, yeah, it's just something that I was thinking about, and yeah, we'll see. I don't think there's a definitive answer right now, but I do think it's something that has to play out a little bit because I mean, I can just look at areas as much as just special teams, right? Just areas that you thought were typically solid.
Yeah.
It's just a few questions around it. So, but something that absolutely does have to be solid with this team is how are they going to go about running their offense? They say if Jameis is healthy this week, you got a potentially healthy Jameis. You got a healthy Taysom Hill, and you have a healthy Andy Dalton. And you have a combination of a couple of those quarterbacks. As you can combine maybe Jameis and Taysom at sometimes, or Andy Dalton and Taysom as you saw this past week. So with the success that they just had against the Seahawks, you know, for instance, Nick, if you're the coach of the Saints, do you run that back? Right, you scored more points than you have this year. It's the worst defense in the NFL. Let's put an asterisk there. But like, how do you proceed? Do you take the success that they had and say, hey, we can build off of this, or you plant a certain way to play offense all summer, and do you want to go back to that? So how do you think they proceed?
So if Jameis is telling me he's healthy, I walk down to the locker room and I tell him and I say, "Hey, it's a long season. There's a lot of games to play. You're gonna take a lot of hits. Take one more week and make sure you're all the way back." Because I want one more look at Andy Dalton. I think Jameis has more upside. I think you're a better team with him, but I don't think you're evaluating this on the upside. You're evaluating it on the downsides. And if your quarterback isn't gonna make a lot of mistakes, that's the guy you go with, the guy that gives you the best chance to not screw things up for. And I fear saying this because the way they just played is a little bit weird, but you don't want him to screw it up for this defense. This defense is supposed to be the thing that wins you games. I don't think Andy Dalton by any means is a perfect player. He's fumbled, he's thrown an interception, he's should have thrown another interception. The 2 turnovers were about as bad as you can see. So it's not like he's
Right.
ultimately super different than Jameis was with some of the mistakes he's made this season. But I do think that you need one more look at him, and I wanna see Andy Dalton with everybody around him. I wanna see him play him with Mike Thomas and Jarvis Landry and have another week with Alvin, and, the guy that can get the ball to those players the quickest in space and allow them to do their thing without making mistakes, I think should be your quarterback. So, Jameis,
Yeah.
we'll see you in another week.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be disingenuous because Jameis
Yeah,
probably isn't
yeah.
100%. He's probably not 90% right now. Maybe he's getting close to 90%. The weeks off have probably done him well, and he thought and felt like he could play through it. And I agree with you. One more week, and I think Dennis Allen almost said as much in his Monday press conference. And I think you throw in the Thursday trip to Arizona in that too. And
Yeah.
and I think that's maybe your let's review this when we have a 10-day break in between games after that Arizona trip. Um, but I agree with everything that you said. The offense has looked the best it has all season, the last 2 weeks under Andy Dalton, and I'd want to keep that going. But I don't think Jameis is incapable of running that offense. I think he did a pretty good job of running that style of offense last year in his first 6, 7 games before he got hurt. But as we said before, part of the reason that Jameis was able to run that okay is because when he didn't see the first couple options open, he would take off and run and did that pretty successfully. So if Jameis doesn't have mobility, then Jameis is definitely out. If Jameis gets his mobility back, maybe he can do it too. But
I
I think they probably want to keep the window open. This is the first time Monday that Dennis Allen mentioned Andy Dalton's performance. He used to say, "Well, first of all, it's all about Jameis's health," and this time he threw Andy Dalton's performance in there as well and said, he said how efficient it's been. And so, I think they want to give Dalton a couple more games to see if he can win the job. I don't think he's won it clearly yet, as you said. I think his interception was the worst interception of the team's season, even with the ones that Jameis threw because of the situation. But I think there's a path to Andy Dalton winning the job if he builds off what we've seen.
To the stuff about last year, Jameis did well. He operated the offense how he needed to. Offense never had the rhythm it's had these last
No,
2
I
weeks
agree.
at any
I
point
agree.
last year, and I think that's got to be a part of it too. Who gives you the most fluidity? Part of that's having guys around you. There were a few missing this week, so I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
the degrees of difficulty were drastically different from last year to this year. I think that has to be part of the equation, and they were playing the 32nd ranked defense. That's why I want to see one more week, just one more test, give you a little bit more of a fuller picture, and then you have enough to evaluate. You got plenty of Jameis that you saw last year. You assume that's who he's going to be. I'm not evaluating Jameis on the games this year he was injured. I think it's unfair. You look at what he did last year versus what Andy's done now. It's not an apples to apples
Right.
comparison because not all the receivers were out there and everything, but I do think that the rhythm-based offense needs to be a factor in this.
Yeah, two more points real quick. First of all, since Kevin mentioned Taysom Hill, I think Taysom Hill is gonna play a bigger role than he has. I think they realize they've been underusing
Yeah.
him, and I think that's true whether it's Dalton or Jameis. I think no matter which one of those guys is starting, there's still a big Taysom Hill package. I don't think this is a product of Dalton being the quarterback is why Taysom's playing more. I think he'll play a lot even if it's Jameis. But I think the perfect scenario is what Jameis Winston has not done yet. He hasn't done it yet. I'm just saying we don't know for sure that he can't do it, which is to show him these last 2 weeks and say, Jameis, this is what we want our offense to look like.
How many years of Drew Brees did he have to
No,
see?
I know, but that's almost like if you want to win this job and keep this job, it needs to look like this. You need to come out there and three-step drop and throw to Alvin, three-step drop and throw a slant to Mike, three-step drop and throw to Jarvis. If you see
Yeah.
at the line of scrimmage, that's what's going to be open because that's the offense we want to run. And then if he proves he can do that and then has the bonus of the, oh, by the way, the play action passes are going to be fire with Jameis Winston because he can throw that ball downfield. And, oh, by the way, if we're down by 14, Jameis Winston is the guy I want because he can bring me back from down 14. That would be the best of both worlds. We don't know he can do it, but I bet he gets one more chance
I
to
think
prove
that
he can do it.
I think there's a couple of things there's a couple of things there, right? With Jameis, are we sure that they want to play the style of football that they're playing with Andy Dalton now with Jameis,
They
right?
need to.
I think that's very clear, right? But I'm not sure. Like maybe it changed, but it just looks like they didn't go into the season with that being the plan, right? It's either Jameis was doing things that they didn't want him to do, or
Right.
he was, they wanted to attack the ball downfield. I saw a stat on, I think it was before this game. The Saints was one of the top teams in how many deep passes they threw this year. And the interesting part is most teams on that list they also correlated directly with teams having the lowest QBR, right? And so the thing that I don't have the answer to yet is did they start the season trying to let Jameis cook, or or was Jameis playing his style of football that he used to play because he didn't last year, and the difference is Sean Payton was there last year. This year he's not. So I'm not exactly sure how they want Jameis to play because from the start of the year it looked like Jameis right try to push the ball downfield because he got the arm to do it. So it seems like that's still a little bit of an open question.
Yeah, well, it's Nick just said it. It better be like they need after what they saw last year, after what they've seen this year. It better be you know what you need to prove that you can get the ball quickly to Kamara, Olave, Thomas, Landry, and the big arm needs to be. If you sink the defense in, then you hit him with that. That can't be Plan A. If it was Plan A, it was the wrong plan.
He'll
Yeah.
probably ultimately get the job back at some point because of the potential. And look, I think the upside is, like I said at the beginning, is tremendous with him, but you got to figure out how to play with all these pieces that are on the team.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when you look at the quarterback position, I think there's still one thing that kind of is looming in the background is, do you go with Taysom, right? I mean, Taysom and Jameis competed last year. It was by all intents and purposes, it looked like a close competition. I thought it was a little bit leaning more toward Jameis than maybe some other people did, but it looked like it was close. It was a close competition. So Taysom has been the spark of this offense. It'd be a different offense, but is he someone they should look at putting that as quarterback one, or should they continue to use him in his limited role and kind of take advantage of him when they feel like they got a schematic, when they got the advantage on the defense?
Quarterback one, no. I don't even think that's part of my thought process on this. I understand the question and where it's coming from. But no, I don't think he should be that. I think he's good in the role he's in. I think they just gotta figure out a way to get him the ball 10, 12, 15 times a game, however it makes sense. I mean, obviously, there's a limit to how much you can expose him and how many times he can drop his shoulder into a linebacker every game and stay healthy. But they need to find out what that number is, and I think it's bigger than it was before. And he's someone that needs to be a vital part of this offense. Like if Alvin's kind of the guy your offense runs through, Taysom needs to be the number 2 guy. He should be squarely in that identity, probably more so than some of the wide receivers that are on the team. So I think he needs to be a big part of this offense moving forward.
Yeah, I think the Saints. I mean, Pete Carmichael's an extension of Sean Payton. They blew their chance to ever make a case for Taysom as QB1 because they had 2 cracks at it 2 years in a row, and they showed they didn't know how to make it work. But I will go to my grave thinking that it was like the most disappointing thing of
Yep.
Sean Payton's entire tenure. Is I I think it could. I still think it could work until he gets hurt from all the punishment he would take. I still think there is a an alternative universe where the offense looks like Josh Allen with Buffalo, like use the big arm to throw it down the field or take off running. You know that should have been his second option. I can't believe that they let Taysom Hill get in so much trouble standing back in the pocket for too long and then sack, fumble, and panicking. It should have been is the first guy open, no, then run. But yeah, I mean, and the alternatives are too good. Jameis Winston and you know, if we got to the point where it's Taysom Hill versus Jake Luton, then we go with the Taysom Hill offense. But
The
not yeah.
most disappointing thing that I've experienced covering an NFL football team was 1, 2, 3, 3.5 years of waiting to see what the Taysom Hill offense would look like, and it was the Drew Brees regular offense with all the stuff Taysom did, just packaged into it and nothing different. And it was the most disappointing
And they
reveal
went
of
to
all time.
Philadelphia and they watched Jalen Hurts run it perfectly, destroying them, and they still weren't like, "Oh, that's how we should do it." I can't
To
believe
make it even worse, like they did it with no wide receivers, which is like even crazier, right?
Yeah.
If there's any moment you want to take the ball out of the hands of anyone involved in the pass game, it would have
Yeah,
been
good point.
last year with the
Ugh.
guys that they had out at wide receiver. And you know, yeah, that I'm probably gonna go to my grave wondering what that looked like too. We might not have to wait long, you know, because you know, some
Yeah, Sean Payton's
former
gonna get a new
coach.
job and then
Yeah,
trade
yeah,
Taysom
yeah. They
Hill.
got his own
Build
his
his whole
future
offense
quarterback.
around him.
Yeah, when he left Dallas, he tried to bring Romo to New Orleans. So he's gonna wherever he ends up, he's gonna try to bring Taysom to wherever his new spot is. So let's stay on the Sean Payton topic, right? And so obviously he sent the text to Loomis saying, "Hey, you know, if you don't want Taysom, get in a year or two when I'm returning to coaching, then I'll take him." And you know, and Ian Rappaport also tweeted out that you know he may be in the mix. You know, he'll be in the mix for some teams going forward. I think Carolina was one of the teams that was kind of alluded to at that point. And so, if you're the Saints and Carolina wants Sean Payton as their head coach, he's in your division. He knows the people. He knows how everyone in this building thinks. He built the offense. He knows the defensive coordinator. All of that good stuff. But you ain't got no first round pick if you're the Saints. What do you do?
I got a story
Mike.
on this.
Oh, all right. Start with Nick.
Yeah, I got a story on this on NewOrleans.Football, just the compensation in general, what they can expect. So let's keep this one narrow through the Carolina perspective. For the general value, I think we got a pretty decent gauge of it on the story. NewOrleans.Football. Sign up, subscribe, read it, support the podcast. We can do this due to your support of the website. Carolina, though, I don't think the Saints would be 100% opposed to them
I think
getting involved.
I think they'd be 100%. Please, Carolina, get involved.
Yeah.
But continue and
Because it's gonna cost them more than it would cost
Yeah.
anybody else. They want them in the division. You want us to play them 2 times a year, you gotta pay us more than everybody else, and I think Carolina could be incentivized to try to put together an offer. They're a team that has struggled with their new owner to put together a successful regime. I think he is a smart person, a good owner. I think he desperately wants that team to be good and relevant. And I don't think you can go anywhere else in the league and find someone that can guarantee turn around your franchise the way that Sean Payton does. Now, could he go there and fail or anywhere else? Of course, it's possible, but I think your best bet is there. And let's just throw this out there. Like, if you could have the Giants head coach, or you could go through what the Chargers are going through and maybe be okay, maybe not. It's if you got to make a change. it sets your team back again. What's that worth? I think it's worth
Yeah.
a lot, as much as anything you could really pay for. So, when people say, "Nah, it's not worth giving it up," you're saying that with the thought process that they're going to hire the right person. I think the teams that went through the hiring cycle this year that hired outside candidates, there's probably a couple people that feel good about what they did, and the rest of them are kind of looking at their situations like, "Man, need some more evidence to know if we got this one right."
Yeah, no question. Um, Here's the problem though, with Sean Payton compensation is I think the Saints want a bidding war. I think they
Oh yeah,
definitely want Carolina in there, because Carolina probably would pay the most of any team that we can think of. I know we've talked about Dallas a lot, but they're off and running this year, so they might not be in the picture, but I think they would want Dallas in there. They want teams.
Dallas loses a playoff game, they're back in.
Yeah, it's true, it's true, but that's what they want. So when the fans are like, "Oh, no, I don't want it to be in the division," the Saints want it to be multiple teams competing for Peyton, and they want desperate teams involved, and they probably want NFC rivals and division rivals involved. The worst case scenario, I think, for the Saints is Sean Payton is probably gonna be picky. I think Carolina's out because Sean Payton can stay in his TV job and wait
Yep.
for a better situation. Sean Payton wants a functional team that has proven that they have the right model and ownership and stability. That is not Carolina. So I think Sean Payton will cross Carolina off his list, and the Saints will be like, "Darn it." I was kinda hoping he wanted Carolina. But the worst case scenario for the Saints is that Sean Payton is like, "I've decided I'm gonna come back to coaching for one team and one team only." The Chargers interest me or the Bears interest me or whatever, but that's the only team I wanna coach for. So you guys talk and see if you can figure out the compensation. And if that team's like, "Well, all we'll give you is a second," then the Saints are gonna be in a bind like, shoot, do we tell Sean, "Sorry, Sean, we're not gonna let you coach, because they're not offering enough." The Saints want a bidding war, so bring on Carolina, bring on Dallas, bring them all on. If you're a Saints fan, you want as many teams interested in Sean Payton as possible.
Two
I think
quick
that
points. Two quick points. I think that their best chance of getting what they want is if a team with a quarterback that's one of those teams that maybe loses an early playoff game and they say, "You know what? Sean Payton's a better option than our coach." That's the Saints' best chance of getting the first round pick
Yeah, because
that
then
they
it's
want.
maybe a 15th or 18th or
Yeah.
20th,
A
22nd
and
pick,
and
not a
Sh
top 10
and
pick.
Sean vetoing it, being like, "No, I'm not going to a team that has no quarterback and no pick." That kinda takes that off the table, so that's their best option, and, B, I don't remember where I was going with this, so I'm gonna pass it back to Kevin. I had another point, I have no idea what I was gonna say, but I lost it. It'll come back to me, and I'll say it.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just say just real quick on the Carolina point. You have no choice if Carolina continues to trend the way they are trending as a team, and Carolina wants to give you that top 5 first round pick with which it looks like they may have. That's a little bit too enticing, right? And then you're gonna have to roll a dice there because the Saints can go into this next season from the looks of it with a lot of questions at quarterback. None of these guys inspire you as a franchise quarterback. And so if CJ Stroud is sitting there, the kid from Alabama there, if you don't have a quarterback and you can have Sean Payton in your division and you can get one of those guys who may be your future, like the kid from Alabama looks really good, then I think that's the business of football. And that's just how it's going to have to be because if you don't have a quarterback, it don't matter where Sean Payton is coaching, right? They have to look within first and figure out what their needs are and then they can figure out if they want to deal with Sean Payton twice a year. I think that's probably going to be how they have to deal with it because, again, you don't have to answer that quarterback, and it just haunts you. One of you guys mentioned something that Jameis kind of had some of the same weapons that Dalton had this past week, with the exception of one guy, and that's Chris Olave. And he's gone on a lot of talk. He's probably, if there was a voting today, he would probably be voted Rookie of the Year, is my guess, or one of the at least Offensive Rookie of the Year. So just putting it out there, is he wide receiver number 1 on this team right now?
Well,
Yes.
the problem is he's dealing with a concussion right now, and now we might see a game with just Jarvis Landry and Mike Thomas, or just Jarvis Landry this week, which is going to be tough. I mean, when's the next time we're actually going to see Thomas, Landry, and Olave on the field together? I'd love to see it. But I still think if Michael Thomas gets healthy, Michael Thomas might lead the team in volume catches.
Yep.
But yeah, Olave has absolutely proven that he's not just a complimentary deep threat. He's a guy who's going to catch every pass on the chart and every situation in the game. And I mean, even maybe their best red zone target. I mean, that catch that knocked him out was phenomenal.
Yeah, Mike's clearly the man. He's probably the most talented guy in that room, but there's one guy on the team that's top 10 in the NFL in receiving or was going into this week, and that's Chris Olave. So just factually, statistically, every other measure, he has been wide receiver 1 for this team to this point. So that's not taking anything away. That's not making a statement. That's just what's happened, and that's where he's at. The biggest takeaway with Olave right now, everybody kinda made him sound like he was kinda, I don't wanna use the word soft, but they acted like he was too, much of a finesse speed player to make physical contested catches. People who bought into that and made a big deal out of it, they took a hit
Yeah.
because he's making contested catches.
Well,
He's
hell,
being
I took
physical.
a hit on that. I took a hit on that, man. I mean,
We've all
yeah,
taken
I'll
hits.
be honest.
Mike took a hit on Mark Ingram. I took a hit on the Adebo hype. Everybody takes a hit, man. So I mean, it
I'm
just kinda
taking a hit
happens.
on it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I didn't think that he was soft for it. I just was. It was a question like, how is he going to deal with NFL
No, a lot
contact?
of
It was,
smart people said the same thing. I mean,
yeah, I was,
yeah, a lot of
and it was
other
on film
smart
though.
people said the same thing.
Right, and it was right there on film. I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't come out of nowhere, but it was just a question mark. It wasn't like definitive. But man, he's answered that question. And if I ever meet the young man, I'm gonna just say, hey, let me just, you don't know me, but I know you, and I was wrong about this.
I will say
You're
this
awesome.
though. I will say this though, until he caught that touchdown pass in the end zone, which was phenomenal. He wasn't catching a lot of contested passes because he is so damn smooth that when
He's had
there
a
is a
couple, though.
ball, no, I know, but I'm over exaggerating. When there is a ball thrown in his general vicinity, the separation he catches or he creates
Yeah.
right before the catch
Oh,
is
yeah.
amazing. I mean, he like when the ball is thrown, there's 1 yard of separation. By the time he catches it, there's 2 yards of separation. His ability to move his body into the path of the ball is incredible.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
question. He's been wide
Yeah.
receiver 1 in this draft class to this point. To this point.
Easily. And I got a slight disagreement with you, Nick. I think I would say he's the most talented wide receiver on the roster. Just talent wise, I would
Well,
probably put him up there. I think Mike is more refined and he's more experienced and he has a better feel for it. But just I think Olave is, I think his talent is, he can do everything. Short,
that's
intermediate,
that
deep.
I hear what you're saying, but I mean, Mike was on a path to be maybe the
I
best wide
got
receiver
yeah.
in NFL history until the injury. So, until someone comes and kind of buries him, I'm believing that Jason's coming back for the sequel. So, I mean, he's still that guy until he isn't. He was looking like it before this injury. So he's got to find a way to stay healthy, though. I mean, that's part of the talent equation as well, and that's definitely been working against him the last few years.
Yeah, availability is part of your talent, part of what you bring as talent in this NFL. Good point there. Okay, man, we're gonna get into a little more positive coming up, but just one more thing I want to ask about on the offense, and there's some other stuff on the offense, but we'll move to the defense shortly after this. Did the Saints? I think they're a running team. I think they should function as a running team. I think they're at their best when they're running the ball. Well, their best player is probably a running back. And I know Nick has always kind of cringed a little bit at some of the carries that they give Kamara, especially when it comes in volume, right? Because I think just the nature of the position, guys tend to get hurt. So did they drop the ball on bringing number 2 running back into this offense? Mike, what do you think?
I mean, yes and no. But the only time I really thought they should have done it was maybe if things lined up in the draft, like a young guy who could then step in and take over for marking. I mean, who are the guys we're talking about? Obviously, we kind of crapped on Latavius Murray a little bit last week, and maybe he'll prove us wrong for that. But I mean, Sony Michel, they kicked the tires on. I mean, he's not lighting up the
He
league.
was
I mean,
hurt though. He was hurt
yeah,
on he failed his physical here.
yeah. But what I'm saying is that's who was available. Like, I did not think the Saints needed to go out and sign another version of Mark Ingram. I think they could have got younger, better, explosive. Like I was kind of intrigued when there was talk about Kareem Hunt being available via trade.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they would have drafted a guy in the 3rd round, that would have been exciting. But I don't think they just needed to bring in another veteran body among the street free agents who are available in June and July. I still think that's the level of player that Mark Ingram is. But it is extremely disappointing that I think early in camp when we were watching Tony Jones Jr. again looked good in the preseason. That's how he won the job. Divine Azigbo, Abram Smith for flashes. It felt like, whichever one of those guys emerges, there might be some young talent here
But
that
what
they
about
can
free
build
agency?
on.
What about free
Yeah,
agency,
but
Mike?
that's what I'm saying. Who
You-
did they miss out on?
It was on my list of draft things. I think they could have
Yeah.
used a
Draft.
younger
Draft.
guy
Yeah.
in the pipeline. I think
Yeah.
they maybe
For sure.
missed the boat a little bit. And I'm not ready to bury Mark Ingram though. Like I think that he could come back. We've seen him have a decent game already. He did fumble in that game, but I don't think 1.8 yards per carry is going to be the norm with him. But
Yeah.
I mean, getting
You
somebody in
could
the
do better. You can do way better. I'm just saying I don't remember a time in the offseason where I thought they should have invested in a veteran free agent that made any
yeah,
sense
I
to
mean, I
me.
wouldn't have put it over wide receiver, tackle, anything like that, but I like on that lower level, okay, 3rd, 4th round, something you could get in the pipeline, this guy develops and gets going. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think and I think we kinda see that now, a little bit of youth at that
Yeah.
position wouldn't be a huge thing, but I wouldn't go, like, call it roster mismanagement or anything like that. Like, they had Mark finished the season decently, it seemed like he had 1 more year, so when they came out of the draft not having one, it wasn't like, "Oh my god," but I do think there's a reason that everybody got excited about Abram Smith
Yeah.
and was kinda
Oh,
looking
the
at him a little bit.
opportunity
Yeah.
for a young guy, and now it becomes a little bit of a must next year, which is too bad
Oh, it's a
with
must
your
for
limited
sure,
amount
yeah.
of draft picks. You don't wanna go into a draft with running back being a must, but I think it will be next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a position that they probably mismanaged in hindsight. I think they just need a little bit more juice out of that position. They need some fresher legs. It just seems like,
Taysom could be part of the equation though too. If they
I
get
think he
Taysom
has to
and
be.
yeah, yeah, and he should be.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I don't ever wanna see a 3rd and less than 2 in Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston on the field. It just doesn't make any sense. Like until someone stuffs the run, right? I don't want to see it. I don't, and you can't say, "Oh, you can take advantage of the big play," because we just saw Taysom. Typically on those short yardage situations, those guys are packing a line of scrimmage, right? You break one tackle, you got the open field, and Taysom field. He's a fast guy. So I just think that Nick, you make a good point. Expanding his usage as a runner, I think is going to be a big part of this offense.
I couldn't
Um,
believe it when they let Mark run in the two-point conversion. I'm
Yeah.
like, "You're not seeing what Taysom Hill's doing here today? You're
you know
really
what
gonna
though?
hand it
I
to Mark Ingram?"
I
He
remember
did
thinking
get
that
that
that was
one, though.
I remember thinking that was a really good call because the defense had just gave up a big play. They had ran downfield. I thought they was a little bit winded. They got Taysom out of there, got Mark in there, quick snapped it, 2-point conversion. But I did kind of cringe a little bit when I saw someone other than Taysom there at the short yardage. So, but another thing that they kind of got, they have to address on offense. I think the special teams play as the return game has been bad, right? And we spoke about Harty recently, and just maybe his decision making being a little bit, you know, um, not ideal. I think that's the best way to put it. Compromise. And Nick, you've brought up Rashid Shaheed. I want to say his name correctly as someone who looked good and may have some potential as the returner. So, what do you think they're going to do in that situation? Do you think he's someone who can give him a boost there?
Yeah, I hear they're bringing him up for this game, and I think he's gonna have a role on offense as well. So that might not speak I don't wanna put 2 and 2 together, but I mean, there's injuries at that position, so we'll kinda see how that comes together, but yeah, I'm hearing that he's gonna be up this week. He was one of the best returners in college football, and one of the interesting things about that whole process, Darren Rizzi runs this study of returners every single year. That's how they found Deontay Harty, that's how they found Callaway, that's how they found Shaheed. They gave him $222,000 guaranteed, which I think was the 2nd most among undrafted players this year. So they
Mm,
think a lot of him, and, he had suitors too. Other teams tried to sign him to their practice squad when they waived him at the end of camp. He decided to come back here. He's gonna be an elevation off the practice squad. I don't think it's gonna be a Murray situation because he sees the opportunity he has here. He thinks this is a good situation for him, or so I've heard. So I don't think it's gonna be, a situation like that. So, we'll see what he can do. If he was as good as he was in college and that study bears fruit again, you gotta like the potential that he has, just on paper.
Yeah, I mean, when I read his bio and looked at his tape from college and then saw him in person, I was like,
He's smooth.
"This guy would be, he would be on all of our projected 53-man rosters except for one thing, Deontay Harty's in his way. So where does he fit?" And now that
mm.
Deontay Harty's injured, there's the path. I mean, it's an obvious path.
He looked great in camp too, and he was only like 7.5 months removed from ACL surgery. So,
Yeah.
and he looked incredibly fluid. He looked fast. We got a video on the NOF Network Twitter page. He just moves really well.
Yeah, yeah, he's definitely someone. I think that's one area where when you are a team and you're built like the Saints and you have struggled offensively and you need kind of all the free yards you can get and those hidden yards. And I think special teams is an area where, we saw this team as, them having an advantage on other teams. And I just think that's been lacking this year. And that's probably been
Very
part of,
much so.
yeah. And I know, Mike, you mentioned the
Oh,
punt game not being as good recently. You want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that and
yeah, I
maybe
mean,
it's,
in Blake Gillikin, I trust, but I mean, it's sort of a when it rains, it pours. On top of everything else that hasn't worked for this team this season, he hasn't been anywhere near his his level. And I thought he had a particularly disappointing game the other night, especially when they had to settle for that midfield punt after the questionable call on the false start, when it looked like they had drawn Seattle offsides, and they're like, "All right, well, let's pin him back instead," and he only pins him back at the 22. I think that
Mm.
could have been a extremely costly miscue. But am I betting against Blake Gilligan being one of the top 5 punters in the NFL the rest of the season? No, I think we've seen enough from him. But all of special teams, including Will Lutz until he had bounced back in a big way, all of special teams been a huge disappointment in the first quarter of the season.
Yeah,
Are we
no
feeling
question.
are we feeling better about Lutz at this point after?
Yeah, of course. I never actually lost faith in him, but, that was pretty nice that after he misses the, 61-yarder by 2 inches, that they roll him out there for a 56-yarder on the opening drive, and he drills that with no problem. You gotta trust him as much as anyone in the league right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought that was a big bounce back, big bounce back kick for him. Okay, so earlier I asked if Chris Olave is the best wide receiver on this team, and I thought we got some pretty good answers. So if I flip that coin over, and obviously the comparison was to Michael Thomas. If I flip that coin over, I'm going to do the same thing with Pete Werner and asking him and ask if he's the number 1 linebacker in this team. And as the entire Saints fan base know, there is only one expert on Pete Werner, and that is Nicholas
He needs to
Underhill.
recuse himself from this question.
I know.
He's either his agent or his brother, I think.
Hey, look, man,
Something
he's
is
he's a
up.
good player. Everybody
Nick
thought he
grows
was
a-
going to be horrible, and it was clear he wasn't going to be. That's all.
Mike,
That's all.
Mike, Mike, if Nick grows a mullet, then something is up, right? I will say that DA on the Saints coaches show, he flexed a little bit. He was like, "Hey, when we made that draft pick, some people were kind of wondering." He said, he kind of said the expert was kind of wondering if that was a good pick, and criticizing a little bit. And he, in his DA way, he said, "I just saw tough, smart, physical football." He said the same thing about every player. So, but yeah, Nick, is Pete Werner linebacker 1?
If he's not, he will be in time, and I think that's a good position for them to be in. They got a guy that's clearly an ascending talent that I think can become the personality of that team. Probably not right now, but once Demario retires, once Cam retires, I think at some point he's going to be your foundational element of that defense, and that's about as good as you can do with a second round pick.
Huge. The importance of him, the way he's playing, he's probably outplayed Demario for a month, but Demario's still the guy who plays every single snap. Werner actually gets off the field, and every once in a while, maybe they'll change that at some point. Demario will drop off, I assume, at some point, since he's a 32-year-old linebacker with all the miles he has in the NFL. So that change of the guard is eventually going to happen, but so important because the drop off from those two to what's next at linebacker on this team is really disturbing. And and when you think of the future, there's a position that you don't necessarily have to make a top draft priority because you've got your next every down linebacker in the building for whenever Demario Davis does eventually let Father Time catch up to him. So that's been one of their biggest wins. But we were talking about the future. There's only so many like core building blocks that you feel really good about beyond 2023 on this team, and Werner and Olave are 2 of the biggest.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
after the years of misses and misses and misses and misses on draft picks at linebacker to finally hit this way, it almost makes all those, well, I wouldn't say worth it, but at least they kind
feel
of
a little
righted
bit
some of
better
those
about
wrongs.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I will say that before Pete Werner, my favorite player on defense to watch was Davenport because you just see bodies flying all over the place. Like it's just fun to see offensive linemen, 300-pound guys with their feet off the ground. Pete Werner has supplanted him as the guy who when you just want to see fun football, it's him. It's almost like he's in the huddle for the other team. He's lightning quick with how he reacts to those plays. So I thought, he's a fun guy to watch. One of the flipping to the other side of the ball, defense had some struggles this week. Chris Richard was on the coach's show also, and he mentioned, some safety play on the deep pass that got over Debo, which I thought was interesting. But
You're going to
during
need
the
to be
game,
more specific
yeah,
on which deep pass got over the top.
Well, go read Nick's film study, so you guys can go get the answers to that question. But I'll just be honest, man. I think it's easy to say stuff in hindsight, right? It's easy to criticize with the results in front of you, and I'm probably gonna be critical of that. But I didn't like it at the time. I just thought that letting Marcus Williams out the building was a bad idea. He's young. You developed him, and he does what he's the best at what he does in the NFL, right? And so, this is one of those games where, man, 43 would have sure been useful. So, did they make a mistake of letting him out of the building, Mike?
Yeah, look,
Oh, Nick, all right, whoever one of you guys run with it.
look, I said in the moment I thought they were gonna miss him. I thought he was probably the best player on the defense, most talented,
Mhm.
significant difference maker, and I think it's fair to say that they miss him. Now Marcus May's injured, and I think Marcus May's a really good player, and it's clear. I mean, you don't have that range back there. Some of these deep passes are getting off. Again, I don't think this game's really fair to make that full judgment. You got JT Gray out there playing deep snaps. You got Justin Evans playing deep snaps. So you're 2 layers down on the defense, but there is no question that this guy you drafted, you developed, and it was only a few million bucks. In hindsight, I think that they probably would have been better off keeping him.
Well, they had a choice to make, between basically Marcus Williams and Tyrann Mathieu. If you're looking at salary ballparks, they wouldn't have kept both guys. If they had kept Marcus Williams, they wouldn't have added Tyrann Mathieu. And the argument was, I agree. I think I said in my first podcast here, my biggest concern is the defense gonna start giving up more deep passes because they made that
Mhm.
trade-off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they have a couple of times. We'll see if it becomes an epidemic when they're fully healthy, which they absolutely were not in this last game. Yeah, JT Gray should never be back there. That lets you know how injured they were. But we're going to need to see more from Tyrann Mathieu for them not to regret that, because I think part of their decision was saving money. I think they got good bang for their buck in the Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May contracts. It's a team that unfortunately needs to get bang for their buck. They can't be the highest spender with their salary cap situation. But I think they partly also wanted to make that switch because they wanted more playmaking from the safety position. They wanted Tyrann Mathieu to maybe be a guy who was forcing some turnovers, and I think we need to see more of that to counteract what they're missing from not having that great center field play.
See, I think they've gotten the turnovers, but I think the consistency at the position has been the bigger issue. He's created 2 in 5 games, which isn't a bad ratio. That's probably more than they were getting out of Marcus Williams, but that eraser ability is huge. And I don't
Yeah.
know that your Marcus May tackles really well, but overall, I don't know if you're tackling it at safety is significantly different right now. So there's some ground to make up, and I think they can get there. They gotta get healthy. They gotta get everybody on the same page, but they definitely made moves in that secondary, and I think this is kinda across the board. We're gonna be alright. Everything they did, "Oh, we're gonna be
Malcolm
good.
Jenkins
Oh, we're
retired.
gonna be good," and it's just
They
that
gave away
yeah.
CJ Gardner-Johnson. So yeah, their top 3 safeties from last year are not part of this team, and then one of their top 2, maybe their top 1 from this, year wasn't in their game, so they were down 4 safeties.
Yep.
Well, here's what
Um,
I'll say. Um, Last time they decided to get rid of some safeties, Malcolm Jenkins, Roman Harper left. They brought in Jairus Byrd and kind
Nah,
of
they aren't
ushered in a
there. They
bad
aren't there.
era.
They
And
aren't
I'm
there.
not saying that's the same. I'm not saying that's the same. What I'm saying is, man, sometimes it just makes sense to keep what you know, man. It's cheaper to keep a. It's like you knew what you had in Marcus Williams, and that was a good player. And then you going. I mean, you got to think of the turnover. You lost Malcolm Jenkins, you lost Marcus Williams, and you lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, right? So you lost 60% of your secondary.
yeah.
There's going to be some issues there, right? And so, and I think it's going to continue into the season because May hasn't been healthy. He's not in the field. He was ahead of Tyrann Mathieu earlier, in
I
training
think there's a
camp. And
good chance
Tyrann,
he comes back this week. That'll be huge if he
Yeah.
does. And Alontae Taylor not far behind, so that'll all help.
yeah, they need some continuity back there. I think they need continuity on both sides of the ball. Now that you think about it, just in the back end on defense, and I think at between the quarterbacks and the wide receiver on
Well,
offense.
we got bad news for you on that front, which is it looks like they might not have Marshawn Lattimore in this game.
Yep.
So,
Wrong
yeah,
game for that.
I mean, he's the worst one to lose of all in that secondary. So that continuity is going to be elusive for a while. And at least they only have Jamar Chase, DeAndre Hopkins, and Devontae Adams coming up over the next 3
Yeah,
weeks.
I know DA said he'll be okay, and they'll see how he responds this week. The stuff I'm hearing behind the scenes is a little bit more grim than that. So, we'll see. I mean, maybe the early prognosis isn't as bleak as it seemed. He was gonna get a second opinion, so we'll see how those things look.
Yeah, yeah, and not an indictment on DA, but I just think he said that he thought he was going to have Jarvis this week, and he didn't, and he thought that Debo may have been back earlier from his ankle injury that he was. So I just think with these injuries, it's more about like, hey, when the game day is here, when he's active, then I'll believe it, right? And that's just as someone covering the team, that's the only way we can. That's the only way we can approach it. A couple more things. Has Cesar Ruiz kind of turned the page a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
are we leaving him alone?
Yeah, I think so for now.
Are we
Yeah,
leaving
no,
him alone?
he looks good. He looks good. He didn't give up a pressure last week. I think he's had 3 or 4 of the best games of his career this season. I need to see more and consistently see more before I say that he's out of the woods, that he's turned the corner, that he's this or that. But I'm just gonna say that he's put together good moments, and you continue to do that, and then the narrative changes.
Uh, uh, the other good thing for Cesar Ruiz, I mean, the run blocking has obviously been really effective these last 2 weeks, but that's another product of this efficient offense. I mean,
Yeah, they aren't
Jameis
blocking as
Winston
long.
was sort of making the offensive line look bad by how long he was holding the ball, especially when he wasn't mobile with the back injury. Last year, there wasn't much good quarterback play for most of the year, and then his rookie year, he had 41-year-old Drew Brees. So efficient, spry quarterback play is also probably going to help him as a pass protector.
Blitz pickup's been a little
Yeah.
bit different too. You watch Andy Dalton; he's signaling over to the running backs to pick up these guys coming through the A gap, and some of that stuff has been a little bit different too. So when that's happening, you aren't looking at the guard crazy because this is supposed to happen and it's working how it's supposed to. So just some of that perception, I think, has changed a little bit the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, put the crown on Doug Marrone's head if he can, if he can he turned that around, because I mean it was looking. I mean I mean he had struggled before, so kudos to him and the coaching staff for kind of flipping the page on where he was. Okay, all right. So we're gonna finish off on a fun one here. Cam Jordan is, he's getting a little long in the tooth as it pertains to NFL players, but he's still productive. So
I thought he
is
played great.
I thought he's been looking good, right? And so is he on the path to being an NFL Gold Jacket recipient, aka Hall of Famer? Let's start with Nick Underhill on this one.
I was going to point to Mike because he's covered
Oh,
his
man.
whole entire career.
All
So
right.
I'm going to defer to Mike,
All
and
right,
then we'll jump in behind him.
You keep blowing off Kevin's orders. Every
I
time he
told him
says
Mike,
Mike,
yeah,
Nick
I'm
answers.
like, I
He
got
finally
no
said, Nick,
power.
well, Nick's going to take this one anyway. Now, look, this one is easy because, one of my biggest frustrations with the Pro Football Hall of Fame is there's like 4 positions where it's always just about the numbers, and defensive end is one of those positions. I mean, if you go to Pro Football Reference, look at the career sack leaders, and they got this little a mark next to who's a Hall of Famer, and if you hit 140 sacks, you get to the Hall of Fame. If you hit 135, you're close. I'm curious if Terrell Suggs is going to get in. He's at about 138, 139, but John Abraham's at 133.5, and he didn't get in. So there's like a cutoff. If Cam gets to that range, if he gets to 135 career sacks, he's got enough All Pros. He's played on enough winning teams. Yeah, he gets in. But he's at 110 right now. So he's got to get to at least, I think, 130, probably 125 at the very least. So he's going to need to have a couple more double-digit sack seasons. But I'm not gonna say he can't do that. He's a guy who's always said he wants to have he wanted to have some of the best years of his career after he turned 30. He wants to maybe even play for 20 years. So you remember when like Kevin Williams came to the Saints and was playing a part-time role? I think Cam Jordan's the kind of guy who might play a part-time role and get 6 sacks. So, but if he ends his career at 120 or 124, he probably doesn't get in. If he ends it at 134, he probably does. But his apex has been good enough that if he gets the numbers, then he'll get there.
I think one of the things that helps Cam, and this stuff shouldn't matter, but he becomes if he's one of those fringe guys right on the cusp where he might get in and maybe like a Simeon Rice didn't. Simeon Rice didn't have the sack numbers. He was close. But if Cam gets close and he's on the fringe, I think him being a guy that's kind of like a face of the league helps him a little bit. And the other thing is the media votes on this, and the media loves Cam Jordan. I don't think that's, him thinking about anything like that, but he has done a good job being nice to people and branding himself and being likable and being available. And if you're one of these national writers or somebody from another city and you need a quote or something, like Cam's the guy. Like he's going to give you something colorful. You're going to walk away feeling good about it and have a positive impression of him. So if you're on the fringe and people like you. And I hate to say this matters, but these are humans
Sure.
voting on this stuff. That stuff does matter. So I think on the coin flips, Cam wins, and he's close enough that I think he's going to make it a coin flip. I think he might get the 20 more sacks he needs to kind of be in that conversation. And I think he ultimately ends up pushing his way into the Hall of Fame.
All right.
He
so
needs
question,
he needs 5 to tie Ricky Jackson for the official Saints record, but he needs 13 to tie Ricky Jackson for like the unofficial, because Ricky Jackson had 8 sacks his rookie year before it became an official sack.
Right, yeah.
I think he's going to want to get. I think he's going to stay long enough. I think they'll let him stay long enough that he's going to want to get at least that Saints record.
So look at it from this way. Both of you guys, just quick yes or no. Hall of Fame, Von Miller right now, yes or no?
He needs more. He needs more too. He's closer. I think he has 119. I think he needs another 10, 11, 12.
He'll get in though.
Yeah.
What he's done on the Super Bowl stage more than once gets him in with 125. Yeah. So Von Miller's getting in. Yes.
He'll get in.
That was an easy one. I thought he. What about JJ Watt?
Yes. I don't think so.
Yes.
He has like 100
See, that's
sacks.
the tough one.
He has
100
he counted
he has
as a defensive
104.5
tackle for a while
sacks.
too. His unique position, I say yes for sure on him.
I don't know.
How many defensive player of the years? How many first team all pros? Oh yeah. We'll make a little side bet off camera on JJ Watt.
He might. I don't know. I don't know if he had the longevity though. And this is a thing where people look at the sacks and there's a case against him. At his peak though, no better player.
Yeah. I don't know if the 140 sack thing is going to continue to hold, right? Because again, you got Von Miller, JJ Watt, Cam Jordan, and I mean, I'm guessing at least two or three of those guys get into the Hall of Fame, right? And I don't know if people consider Cam Jordan better than JJ Watt. At their peak, JJ Watt was probably better. Cam Jordan has had longevity, and he's always been right there, maybe just a half a notch below him. And again, he's just been healthy and he's been available. So it's interesting. It's just if he continues to get these sacks like he's been getting them, and we don't expect him to get 15 a year, but if he continues to, maybe just slightly get into double digits, and once he get into that maybe 120 range, I think that may be a sweet spot. So we'll see how it goes. So. All right, man. Fun pod. We got through a lot, and yeah. We'll see how it continues to go next week. Thank you guys for supporting us. There's a ton of content on NewOrleans.Football, to the point sometimes where even I get a couple of days behind, and that sucks because I'm supposed to be like, I'm an employee. I should be reading this stuff first. So that's a good thing, right? If someone's telling Nick, oh man, you're giving me too much to read, I'm pretty sure Nick is going to smile and say I'm doing my job pretty well. So. NewOrleans.Football, everyone here is doing their job pretty well. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. So support us. We need it. We appreciate it. If you're already supporting us, tell someone else to support us, and keep giving us a chance, because we're going to keep getting better at this thing. So thank you guys for listening. We'll see you soon, and we are out.
We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.